Evening, John.
Evening, Richie.
How are you getting on?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. I want to start with Manchester City and their 6-1 demolition of Huddersfield, because we can move on to Liverpool later on, how they progressed. But Manchester City last year, Huddersfield was one of those games, oddly enough, whereby they struggled to break them down. But once they did, the floodwaters opened and they ran riot against Huddersfield on Sunday. Looked really impressive in doing so as well. Sergio Aguero grabbing a hat-trick, and they really looked like a side who've picked up where they left off last season. Yeah,
well, if you're judging them on last season, Richie, the matches they played against Huddersfield, actually they struggled to beat them. At Huddersfield, I think they scored in the last, very, very late in the game to beat them at Huddersfield, and I think they drew with them in Manchester near the end of last season. Actually, I think it helped to keep Huddersfield up. I think Huddersfield got a draw there and then went to Chelsea and got a win or something, but a bit of a miracle, two miracle results for them. But unfortunately for Huddersfield, City scored fairly early on, and once they scored early on against them, then Huddersfield didn't have anything to come back at all. So they were very, very impressive again in a game that you would expect them to win, but they won the game much easier. And did better this year against Huddersfield than they did last year.
They certainly did. Sergio Aguero looks like he's back on full form again, grabbing a hat-trick at the weekend. Looks like a player who's regained his hunger and is kind of relishing that. I guess this time last season we were wondering whether Sergio Aguero is going to be a starting striker for Pep Guardiola in Manchester City. He seems to have relished the challenge of stepping up to the plate there.
Well, I thought Guardiola was a bit hard on him last year, to be honest, Richie, on Aguero. But I think they called it, tough love.
Yeah.
And I think he wasn't working as hard as Guardiola wants the forwards to work. Now, he's working much harder. I don't think he was happy about it, but he's working much harder than he did. And he's a better player for it. And that's all managers can do. Whatever club you go to is get the best out of the players that you have at your disposal. And, the goals that Aguero was scoring, you think, well, I think he's doing enough. But it wasn't good enough for Guardiola. And I think it's made him a better player. He's scoring more goals. He's working harder. I think it's something that he didn't really believe in himself. But now that he's chasing around a lot more, he scored more goals and he's playing better than he did before Guardiola got there.
It's kind of a scary prospect when you see a squad that is already, packed with star names and has a lot of great performances under their belt. But when you start to bring the extra 5-10% out of the likes of Sergio Aguero, it becomes a frightening prospect for other sides in the Premier League that have to come up against that, because they're turning already really, really good players into even better ones.
Yeah, well, that's what great managers do. Richard, there's no doubt about that. And if you look at Aguero, I think his attitude was, well, I'm scoring the goals, I'm doing enough, I don't have to do any more. But it wasn't good enough for Guardiola. And he does work harder, and it hasn't stopped him scoring the goals, actually scoring more goals, which makes sense, because if you get a forward that's chasing around, Richie, it's very hard to mark them. If they're staying up the field and they're not going to move, okay, they'll get a certain amount of goals. But if they're working the way that Aguero is now working, he's even more difficult to mark. So he's, to be fair to him, a lot of players would have got the huff and say, well, I'm not going to do that, I'm doing enough anyway. But that wasn't the case. He obviously wants to stay at Manchester City. They're a terrific team. He wants to be part of it. And when you're doing what he's doing, it's very, very hard to leave him out of the team. Don't forget, when Aguero first came, he left him out a few times, Richie. Till he got him going, and he worked hard, and worked harder and harder, and he's done that. So there's no way, when he's doing what he's doing, that he can leave him out of the team.
One of the other standout performances from City's victory last week, has to be said, was that of David Silva. Silva is one of those players I'd imagine that you find an absolute joy to watch, much like the rest of us.
He's brilliant. And I think what's happened to him, I think he was having a tough time personally, wasn't he, with the baby coming. It was a premature, very premature baby. So that could have been on his mind a little bit as well, especially during the World Cup. But there was an enthusiasm and a freedom about him last week, as if he was delighted that's all over and he's back to playing football and without anything else on his mind. And he's a great attitude, Richie. I mean, he's been a terrific player for years and years. But all these great players, the next match is the next match. And whatever you've done in the past is gone. And he was, he was terrific last week. He was man of the, I think he might have been man of the match, even though Aguero scored 3 goals. But he's always been a great player and a great team player, and very, very valuable player for Guardiola.
He's one of those players that if you watch him, it's almost as if time and space works at a different speed for him. Is that he's able, his vision, his ability to pick out a pass, his speed of thought seems to be working on a different plane to other people's.
Well, that's what makes great players, Richie. They find space where most players don't find space. I always found with the great players, after the first touch of the ball, Richie, when they receive it, they've more room than they had before they touched the ball. And with bad players, the more touches they got in the ball, the less time they had on the ball. So it's also a positional sense, being in the right position, but first touch, making space where there was no space. It's what all the great players do. And he certainly does that. He's a joy to watch. He
almost seems ageless as well. We don't think of David Silva as being a guy who's ticking on into his early 30s and possibly getting into that quote-unquote latter stage of his career. But there's no kind of sense that the knocks have taken their toll. He's a player who's playing with, as you mentioned, a sense of freedom.
Yeah, I don't think he takes many knocks. If you look at him over the years, it's another thing the great players don't do. They don't get involved in physical duels. They keep out of the way, and they're able to, again, with their first touch, make the space. Of course, he's had a few knocks in his time, but generally speaking, when you see a great player playing, you say, how does that fella get the time and space to do what he did? Well, first of all, it's positional sense to receive the ball, and secondly, it's a touch on the ball that makes the space for them. And if you look at all the great players, that's what they do. And he's one of the great players, I think. He's a terrific lad.
Going forward as well, I'm looking at the run of fixtures for the next 3-4 weeks or so, and it looks as if it's kind of a period where Manchester City can make hay. You kind of presume that they're one of the better teams in the Premier League anyway. Obviously the record over the course of the last 12 months proves that, but when you see like their next 3 games are a lunchtime fixture on Saturday against Wolves, away to Wolves, they then got home games with Newcastle and Fulham, away to Cardiff, and then at home to Brighton. Like City, you're going to look at them here, going to put the boot down and score goals to beat the band.
Well, you never know what's going to happen in the future.
True.
And they won't be looking at it that way, I can assure you. What the great managers do, they take every match as serious as, if you're playing the lower teams, they've taken it as serious as if you're playing the top teams. And I know, like I think it was Shankly was saying, I think Guardiola says, you reduced your mentality to the mentality that the teams at the lower end of the team have. In other words, effort, they're going to beat you for effort. But if you try harder than them and you beat them at their own game, then you make it easy for yourself. And that's what City did all last season. But I think he won't, and nobody, I don't think you should ever look ahead.
Injuries,
the next game.
Yeah, injuries and managing the squad, I suppose, is going to be Guardiola's greatest challenge this year. We've already seen Kevin De Bruyne ruled out for, who knows, possibly 3 to 4 months with a knee ligament injury. Claudio Bravo this week as well with a ruptured Achilles tendon. He's going to be out possibly until the end of the season. So they're looking at calling goalkeepers back from on loan. They've only got young Danny Grimshaw essentially as their backup to Ederson. So you're getting not necessarily down to bare bones. That's not the worry just yet, but to keep everybody fit and keep everybody healthy. They have had a rather lucky injury profile over the last while. You don't want that from a Pep Guardiola perspective to try and turn against them this term.
No, well, you can only take the injuries as they come, and he has made signings to cover most of the positions in it, Richie. The squad is quite big. He bought Mahrez in the summer. He's got Mendy coming back at left back. The squad is quite big. Now, I think De Bruyne will be a loss to them, obviously, because he's the best in his position in the club. But if you look at them and the squad that they have in relation to most of the others, it's still a very, very big squad. I mean, and they obviously have that because you're not going to go through a whole season in the Premiership without getting injuries. And I think he's done the best that he can, Guardiola, to have the squad to cover the injuries that they're going to get.
Yeah, I mean, looking forward in towards Christmas, Kevin De Bruyne is probably going to be coming back into a side where Bernardo Silva's after having a run of 12 games and performed stormers in pretty much each of them, and he's going to have a difficult time to re-establish himself, especially coming back from a knee ligament injury like that. I mean, you don't come back with 100%.
No, well, the physiotherapy is brilliant now, and getting over injuries is brilliant. better than ever before. So, I mean, but De Bruyne will come back into the team, obviously, if he gets back to full fitness, he'll get back in the team. But it's a long season. I mean, if they're going for the League Cup, they're going for the FA Cup, they're going to the Champions League, they're going to the Premiership, you need a big squad. And De Bruyne won't be playing in every match. None of them will be playing in every match. So that's the reason they have what they have. I mean, it's impossible to go through a season in the Premiership playing like 14 players or 15 players. It's an impossibility. First of all, the players get tired. They need a break in between, and then you got the injury situation. So I think Guardiola has got as big a squad as he would want at this particular time to get ready for the season.
One thing I was going to ask you about, and Sean, via text 53106, if you want to get your questions into John, by the way, is the number. Sean's beat me to it. He asks, does John think that allowing cameras in and around the Etihad for the City documentary, that's All or Nothing, it's up on Amazon Prime, was an unnecessary distraction? Surely Pep should have put his foot down and vetoed it. I know you haven't seen the whole thing, John. Obviously you've seen snatches of it and heard bits and pieces about it. That step of allowing the cameras inside the inner sanctum of the dressing room, would it be something that you'd be in favour of, or something that you'd be a fan of? No,
I'd be totally against it, Richie.
Right.
I think what happens in the dressing room stays in the dressing room. And I can't... it was obviously some sort of a commercial decision. I don't think Guardiola would have initiated that at all. I'd say he wouldn't really fancy doing it. Now, what happens in the dressing room is very important that you keep it secret, you know? Not secret, but you say things in the dressing room, like Fergie, for example, when he was at Manchester United, would give them the hairdryer, as they called it. But nobody knew what he actually said. You know, people say, yeah, he gave us the hairdryer. But that was in the dressing room. I mean, I think that's where some of the managers make the mistake that, well, Mourinho in particular makes a mistake of criticising the players publicly. And, we've seen that with Pogba and Luke Shaw and various players at Manchester United. It's usually, when managers are going to give you telling off, it's one-on-one. And in the dressing room, I've played under a few managers, Don Revie, who would go mad at sometimes in the dressing room. But that would stay there. You know, nobody would talk about it. I was very, very surprised that he allowed the cameras in. It might have been a commercial deal that the club wanted him to do, but it certainly wouldn't be anything I would be in favour of. In fact, I'd be totally against it, Richie. There
is a sense that we probably got a sanitised version, maybe, even of what went down, and that the cameras were allowed in every now and again. But I'm just curious, are these documentaries, because there have been a lot of them, down through the years, even going back to there was a Manchester City one around 1980 involving Malcolm Allison and the troubles he had there, and John Bond coming in to replace him. Would you be a fan of watching these things, John, yourself at home?
I'd watch it. I mean, everybody wants to watch what's going on in the dressing room, Richie. I certainly would be very, very keen on watching what's done in the dressing room.
Yeah.
But I don't agree with it.
Right.
I mean, I would be curious, and I'd think, oh God, I wouldn't do that. If I were the manager, I definitely wouldn't do it. But of course, I would watch it. But I would say at the same time, I think the manager's not correct, or maybe foolish to be doing that.
Yeah.
I'm surprised. I haven't actually seen the whole documentary, and it might be sanitised, as you say, Richie. But at the same time, it's in the dressing room. Things happen in the dressing room that nobody knows about. There's rows that go on sometimes, and it's blown over. But the manager criticising players publicly, in my opinion, never works. And if you're really doing the job and allowing the cameras into the dressing room, there's definitely times that somebody will be getting a right telling off.
Yeah. You
can't do that.
Thankfully, from a Manchester City perspective, last season seemed to work out okay for them. They seemed to come out on the right side of things, so there wasn't necessarily anything that they had to be chopping out to a huge degree there. John, we've still loads.
You don't know that, Richie, when you're doing it.
True.
You know what I mean? Like, it's all right saying now, it was a great for Manchester City, because I don't think there was many rollickings going on in the dressing room, and there was very seldom anything went wrong. But you don't know that's going to happen before you commit yourself to it. I mean, he was lucky to get away with that. There was good play, but I just don't agree with it. I don't think it's right.
But you'll watch one gladly.
Oh, I'd watch it. Yeah. If somebody wants to do it, I mean, was it Graham Taylor years ago?
Yeah, the impossible job.
Coming into the England dressing room, I think he wanted to show everybody how they were going to qualify, and it was a total disaster. Total disaster.
Did anyone ever approach you to kind of do one of them in your managerial career?
I was approached a few times.
Yeah? At what club are we talking here?
When I was at West Brom as manager.
Yeah? Somebody wanted to come in and just kind of...
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't blame them wanting to come in. I mean, if I was a newspaper man or I was in the media, I'd want to get into the dressing room. But that doesn't mean I'd allow it if it was myself. I mean, the Guardiola and that, if they want to do it, that's their own business.
Yeah.
But and I would certainly watch it, but I wouldn't allow it to happen. I don't think it's right.
Was it a BBC ITV kind of thing, or?
I think it was a local station in Birmingham, yeah.
Okay, yeah. And you just vetoed it and said no?
You said no way.
Yeah.
No way. I don't. And again, I mean, that's the business for journalists and the television to get as much news and get in there as much as they possibly can. That's their business. I don't blame them for trying, but it's up to the manager to say no, I'm not going to do that, or a manager to say yes if he thinks it's good for the club. I just don't happen to think it's good for the club or for the team in any way whatsoever.
Okay, well, lots more to cover with John still to come. Get your questions in as well, 53106 for 30 cents. You can tweet us at Off the Ball too. We'll be looking at Liverpool's improved spine and also the rise of Leeds in the Championship, all to come after this.
Off the Ball on News Talk.
Bruce Betting Sportsbook, Casino and now Live Casino. Download the Bruce Betting app to see why for the Premier League, Bruce Betting are giving you more. With price boosts, live in-play betting, cash out and ACCA insurance. Make Bruce Betting your Premier League bookmaker. Bruce Betting, in store, online and now on your phone. Please gamble responsibly. See dunlewy.net.
Bargain Town, summer bet sale, now on. Don't miss today's newspaper or Facebook for our fantastic specials. That's Bargain Town, first in Dublin for beds.
Off the Ball. This is News Talk.
Welcome back. John Giles is still on the line. A load still to cover with John over the course of the next quarter of an hour or so. Monday night away to Crystal Palace used to be the kind of fixture that would give Liverpool palpitations over the course of the last 3, 4, 5 and even beyond kind of years. But they knocked off a 2-0 victory with relative ease on Monday night, John, and have looked very, very impressive so far. As I mentioned at the top of the show and the top of this piece here, that improved spine for them seems to be working wonders, at least in this very early stage of the season.
Oh, definitely, Richie. First of all, they got a goalkeeper who looks very, very reliable and very, very good, which they haven't had a good goalkeeper for a few years. They got Van Dijk at the back, who's made a huge difference for them. And Gomez has come into the team, one of the younger lads who was in before. I think he was injured and looked very, very good alongside Van Dijk the other night. They've got Keita. Is that how you present him?
Keita, yeah, Naby Keita, yeah.
It looks like it's going to give them a bit more skill and a bit more invention in the middle of the field. Shakira from Stoke, I think, will be a good player for them over the season when they'll be having to make changes. So I think Liverpool have done probably the best business in the summer than any other club. There's no doubts about that. And if anybody's going to challenge Manchester City or beat them for that matter, I think it's going to be Liverpool. It's
kind of testament to a club who identifies their targets and pretty much does everything they can to secure them. Obviously, Van Dijk took probably 6 months longer than they maybe anticipated to get over the line. They secured his signature back in January for 75 million. Naby Keita, they had to wait for a year before they could get them off RB Leipzig. I know they made maybe attempts to get him before then. And even Alisson, I mean, they may have had their eye on him from last season, but they've decided to make their move. It shows that moving at the right time can actually get you the targets that you want. Yeah, well, I think it's a combination of the situation that Klopp is in, that he obviously has the confidence of the board. They're all working together. He's got the players that he wants. I'm sure that they were the players that he wanted in, and they were the players that they needed. So that's when a club is well run and well managed, and that's happened at Liverpool. Oh, they're definitely going to be a threat this year, and they're much better state than the. I mean, don't forget, as you said, when they were winning 2-0 against say Crystal Palace last year or the year before, it could end up 2-2 or 3-2 against them. There was no solidity in the defensively. Now it's a different story. They look like a real team now,
Richie, and I think they'll get better and better as the season goes on.
Yeah, that security of having a goalkeeper at the back who isn't afraid to come and claim things. His distribution is obviously quite well. Virgil van Dijk as well, who just looks immense. Jurgen Klopp, after the game on Monday, pretty much saying that they probably underpaid, given his abilities, at 75 million for Virgil van Dijk, which I'm sure will do Virgil no end of good when he goes in to kind of renew his contract in a year.
Yeah, but Klopp's already said, well, you know, managers love to talk about their players like that, and he's quite right to do so. I mean, they needed to do that, especially the goalkeeper. I mean, you saw what happened in the Champions League final. Goalkeepers can, say for Manchester United, there's no doubt that when their goalkeeper can save them, say, 10 points a season. I mean, Liverpool's goalkeepers over the last couple of years have been losing them 10 points a season. That's a 20-point difference between a good goalkeeper and a bad goalkeeper. And this fellow looks a good goalkeeper for Liverpool, and he'll be worth the money if they do their stuff in the way that you're expected to do it, like Van Dijk is doing it now. They're well worth the money, Richie, and that's why managers pay big money, as long as they're paying big money in the right way. And I think Liverpool's buying in the transfer close season here has been very, very good. A
lot of people have been drooling over the performances, and I know, again, it's a small sample size of the first two games of the season, and West Ham and Crystal Palace are hardly world beaters in their own right, but Naby Keita, after his arrival from Leipzig, being able to bring the ball from back to front in midfield, that kind of dynamism they've had around there, it looks like a presence in midfield that Liverpool haven't really had over the course of the last 2 years or so.
Oh, it's a few years since they've had a player like that in the middle of the field, Richie. You know, a creative player. I mean, they've had players who have been up and downers, good-hearted players, but didn't have the creative force that this lad seems to have, and that was needed badly as well. So, you know, the buying has been good. There's no doubt about it. They bought well, and if you buy well, then you're going to play better as the season goes on. It's all about your judgment in the transfer market. You know, you can pay. Some clubs have paid a lot of money for players that haven't done it, Richie. There's plenty of those about. Yeah. But Liverpool look like they've bought well, they spent their money well, and I think it will pay dividends for them during this particular season.
Would you be confident that Jurgen Klopp is still, you know, able to wring something extra out of this side this year?
Yeah, well, I think he just needed the players. I think Klopp, we all talk about Klopp's philosophy. Klopp's philosophy is go, 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 go. We're going to attack these teams. We're going to score goals. We're going to beat these teams. But he never had any real emphasis on defending. Now, if he puts that right, which I think he has now, then now you've got a team. In other words, if the lads up front do their stuff and they get 2 or 3 up, and the lads at the back are doing their stuff, you're not going to be drawing 2-2 or 3-3 like they have done in the past. And that's points dropped all over the place. So I think he's got a complete team now, and it won't stop them scoring goals.
Yeah.
They still score the goals, but they won't be losing the goals that they've been lost over the last few seasons.
It's a scary prospect if that happens to continue for them in terms of their form. I mean, they're an ideal candidate for how to do your recruitment over the course of a summer, whereas someone like someone like Tottenham is a kind of a case in point of, you know, maybe not necessarily how not to do your recruitment, but, you know, at least do something. A lot of people very, very surprised that Spurs managed to not sign anybody, at least of note, over the course of the summer. You'd imagine that would leave them vulnerable going forward throughout the season, because I don't think anybody viewed Spurs as having the deepest of squads last term. No,
I think it's a financial situation there. I think they've run into big trouble with building a new stadium, Richie. You know, like it's not finished yet, and apparently it's £30 million more because of the fall in the pound and all the various things. So I think it's a disappointment for the Spurs supporters. Now, Pochettino was talking a load of rubbish last week, where he said, you know, at the end of last season, he said, well, the chairman has got to be brave now, and you've got to buy players, and we've got to do this and doing that. And he was in the paper last week saying, no, the newspaper guys picked it up in the wrong way. He said, I meant brave by not spending money and bringing the young lads in, which is a total load of nonsense.
Yeah.
I mean, the Spurs are going to they've got a very, very good first, 12, 13 players, but they haven't got the strength and depth, there's no doubt about that. And they're in the position of Manchester City are in. They're in the Champions League, going to be in the League Cup, the FA Cup, the Premiership. You know, you need a big squad of players, and they just don't have that. I mean, I think it's inevitable that they're going to have injuries. So I say the likes of Harry Kane or Dele Alli, any other their important players gets injured, it's going to be very, very difficult for them. And I can't see them doing as well this year as they did last year. They've got a very good first 11, first 12, but after that, it's going to be very, very tricky for them.
Yeah, and you'd imagine the uncertainty about their home and when they're actually going to get to move into the new White Hart Lane can't be the most ideal scenario for the players either.
No, it's not easy. It's not easy for the club because, like, when you're starting the season, you want to be going in like Liverpool have done, got the players in, everything settled, ready to go. It's anything but at Spurs. I mean, we don't know when the new stadium's going to be ready. They're going to have difficulty with fixtures. They haven't bought a player. They haven't improved the squad. So, I wouldn't be optimistic about Spurs this particular season. I think it's going to be a big struggle for them this year, Richie.
John, one of the things we always get asked about when you're on, obviously enough, is to, the text come in and go and ask John what he thinks of Leeds so far this season in the Championship. They've made a hell of a start under Marcelo Bielsa. I know you were looking on with their draw with Swansea, which is their worst result of the season so far, but there are shoots of hope, certainly, from a Leeds perspective, that things are looking on the up and up over there at the moment.
Oh, definitely. Well, first of all, I think they've got the ownership situation worked out, and the manager seems to be good. I know he's an experienced manager. Well, that's your start. Without a good ownership, you're not going to have a good team. Nothing is run properly, Richie. I think they have that now. I think they've got the manager seems to be good. I watched them against Swansea, and I was quite impressed with them.
Yeah,
I think their work rate was good. They passed the ball well, much better than they did last season, and they looked like a team. Now they've made a good start, as you say, but that's a long, long, hard season in that Championship, Richie, as we all know.
Oh, yeah.
But they've got the ownership right. I think they've got the coach, the manager right, and that they're the basics that you have to have a successful team. So hopefully now, from myself, one of the old Leeds players, and the old supporters, that they'll come good. Because the support they get there is fantastic, Richie, at the at Elland Road. The atmosphere is brilliant, and they're a team I think that deserve to be up in the Premiership.
Yeah, I know you were saying you were over there in the early part of the season this year, and just the air of enthusiasm that seems to be around Elland Road is pretty palpable.
Oh, it's unbelievable. I was up for the Paul Madeley
memorial kind of stuff
match with paying respects to Paul before the match against Stoke, and I couldn't believe the atmosphere in the ground. Well, funny enough, when you played, you see, Rich, you only come out on the pitch ready for the kick-off, especially in my day.
Yeah.
Whereas, you wouldn't see the build-up. You weren't aware of the build-up to the game in the stadium. But I don't know whether it was like that in my day or not. But the build-up before the match with the crowd and the songs they were singing and everything else, the atmosphere was absolutely brilliant. And this was the first match of the season. So it could only get better. And I think the support that they have, like if they did get back into the Premiership, I think it only holds 40,000. They'd get 40,000 every match, an enthusiastic crowd. So I think they're one of the teams in the country, in England, that should be in the Premiership. But you have to do it the right way, and I think they seem to be doing the right way now, Richie, which is good for the whole Leeds supporters.
Yeah, too smart Latin Hibra is what they always say, John. A decent start is half the work. Joan Raheny is one of the many people who's been on to us, getting on to you to ask about Leeds tonight. So there you have it, Joe, and thank you for your text, 53106. John, thanks so much for taking time out this evening. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Richie.